For months, a tired waitress quietly helped the shy man who slipped into her diner at dawn, never guessing he was a movie star hiding in plain sight. The day his lawyers marched in with 4 bodyguards, she thought she was in serious trouble, until she learned he'd come to repay her kindness in a way that would change her entire life. The man at table 7. Some stories don't begin with fame or fortune. They begin with a tired waitress, a chipped coffee mug, and a stranger who keeps coming back when he doesn't have to. By 5:30 every morning, the city outside still felt half asleep, but the diner where Maya worked was already humming with fluorescent light and the low hiss of the grill. Her feet ached before the first order, her eyes burned from the night shift she'd just finished at the convenience store, and her hands were raw from too much hot water and cheap soap. Still, she tied her apron, forced a smile into place, and told herself the same thing she did every day. Just get through one more shift, one more bill. One more month. Then the bell above the door would ring, and the only quiet part of her morning would walk in. He always came alone, hoodie pulled low, baseball cap shadowing his face, the kind of dark jeans you forget to notice. The first time he sat at table 7, Maya didn't think anything of him. Another tired stranger, another bottomless coffee, but he thanked her with a softness that didn't match his rough, sleepless look. No phone, no rush. Just him, a notebook, and a silence that felt almost gentle. When she topped off his coffee, he looked up and gave her a small, shy smile, like he wasn't used to being seen. For a long time, she only knew him as the guy at 7. He always ordered the same thing: black coffee, scrambled eggs, extra toast. He never sent anything back, never complained, never snapped his fingers or whistled like some of the truckers did. He listened when she spoke, even if it was just, "Kitchen's backed up, sorry," like it mattered to him that her morning was hard. Sometimes he'd leave a tip that was too big for someone dressed like that. Maya assumed he was one of those quiet construction guys who worked nights, or a musician between gigs. He had that lost but kind aura that fit both. On Tuesdays, when the lunch rush slowed and the sun finally cut through the greasy windows, Maya would scribble little sketches on the back of unused order slips to keep herself awake. Faces, hands, the curve of light on a coffee cup. One morning, as she cleared his plate, a folded slip slipped from her apron and landed by his boot. He picked it up before she could, his brow creasing in surprise. It was a quick sketch she'd made of his hands wrapped around a mug. "You drew this?" he asked, voice low, with that strange mix of curiosity and hesitation, like he didn't want to cross a line. She flushed, reached for it. "Just messing around, it's nothing." But he didn't laugh it off. He studied the lines like they were important. "It's not nothing," he said quietly. "You see more than most people do." There was a weight in his tone that made her chest tighten, like he knew exactly what it felt like not to be seen for who you really were. It wasn't until the 3rd month that she finally recognized him. A slow Tuesday, the TV above the counter stuck on some entertainment show with the sound off. A red carpet clip flashed on screen, a man in a perfect suit, the same tired eyes, the same quiet half-smile. The name Keanu Reeves scrolled underneath. Maya froze with a coffee pot in her hand, heart stuttering. She glanced at table 7. Same jawline, same eyes, same way his shoulders curled inward like he wanted to disappear into his hoodie. The world saw him under bright lights. Here he was, the guy who apologized when she spilled a little coffee on his sleeve. For a second she almost dropped the pot. Then she made a choice. She looked away, turned the TV off, and when she walked toward him, she asked the same question she did every morning. "Refill." His eyes searched her face like he was bracing for something, for the flicker of recognition, the sudden change. When it didn't come, his shoulders relaxed just a little. "Yes, please," he said, with a grateful nod that told her more than words. Their rhythm became its own fragile ritual. He came in just before the real rush, when she was barely holding herself together after 5 hours of sleep and a bus ride from the tiny apartment she shared with her younger brother. She'd bring his coffee without asking, and he'd ask about her brother's exams, her failed car, the art school she had dropped out of to work 2 jobs after their parents' accident. Sometimes, when the grill orders were backed up and all the booths were filled with impatient customers, he'd quietly stack his own dishes at the end of the table, wipe up a spill with his napkin so she wouldn't have to. Once, during a particularly bad storm, the diner door blew open and sent a tray crashing to the floor. A large man at the counter started shouting at Maya, accusing her of nearly spilling coffee on his suit. his words sharp and ugly. Before she could even apologize, the man from table 7 stood, walked over, and placed himself gently between them. There was no dramatic shove, no raised voice, just a calm firmness as he said, "She's been running this whole place by herself for an hour. You don't talk to her like that." The angry customer opened his mouth to argue, then hesitated. Something in the stranger's stance, the steady, unwavering way he held his gaze, made the man falter. The room's energy shifted. A couple of truckers at the booth behind them went quiet, watching. Maya felt her hands shake, not from fear now, but from the sudden realization that someone, this quiet, tired man, had chosen to stand up for her. The customer grumbled, threw some crumpled bills on the counter, and left, the bell clanging behind him. Nobody clapped, nobody cheered, but when Maya turned, the man at table 7 was already sitting again, eyes back on his notebook like nothing had happened. She set a fresh coffee in front of him without asking. "On the house," she whispered. He just smiled that small, crooked smile. "Then you owe me a drawing instead," he replied. Weeks turned into months. The seasons outside the fogged windows shifted, but inside the pattern stayed the same. Her exhaustion, his quiet presence, the soft space that formed between them where both of their masks could slip a little. Maya never mentioned the movies. He never offered stories about premieres or directors. Their world was smaller than that. Cracked tiles, burnt toast, her brother's soccer games, his occasional questions about what she'd paint if she ever had time again. There were moments, brief, unspoken ones, when she wondered if she was falling a little in love with the version of him that existed only in this diner, not the actor on the screen. The man who refilled the sugar without being asked, who listened like every word out of her mouth was worth his full attention. But she kept those thoughts locked up tight. People like him didn't belong in lives like hers. It was enough that he kept coming back. And then one gray Wednesday morning, he didn't. 7 days passed, then 10, then 14. Every time the bell above the door rang at 5:30, her heart jumped and then dropped when it wasn't him. Maya told herself it was ridiculous to worry about a man she barely knew. Maybe he'd gone back to filming. Maybe he'd found another quiet place where nobody knew him. Still, a small fear grew in the empty space he left behind. She started carrying one of her best sketches, a portrait she'd drawn of him from memory, folded in her apron pocket, just in case he walked back in, and she finally found the courage to say, "Thank you for seeing me." On the 15th morning, the bell rang again. She didn't even look up at first, too tired, too used to disappointment. But the diner went strangely quiet, a stillness settling over the clatter of dishes and the murmur of early customers. Maya glanced toward the door and felt her breath catch. 4 large men in dark suits were stepping inside, eyes scanning the room with the sharp focus of people who were paid to notice everything. Behind them, 2 people in immaculate business attire followed, carrying leather folders, moving with a purpose that didn't belong in a greasy spoon at dawn. One of them looked straight at her name tag, then right into her eyes, as if they'd come here for one reason only. "Are you Maya?" the woman asked. Maya's fingers tightened around the pencil in her hand until the wood dug into her skin, a rush of dread and confusion flooding her chest. She nodded, throat suddenly dry, as the 4 bodyguards shifted their stance, subtly closing off the exit behind them. "Good," the woman said, stepping closer. "We're here on behalf of Keanu Reeves. He asked us to talk to you." "The visit?" The air in the diner thickened so fast Maya could almost taste it. Coffee cups paused halfway to lips, forks hovered over plates, and every eye seemed to flick between the men in suits and the girl in the stained apron whose name suddenly mattered. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure the whole room could hear it. "Yes," she managed, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm Maya." Her boss, Phil, peered out from behind the kitchen window, a spatula in his hand and panic in his eyes. The woman in the tailored blazer gave a professional smile that didn't quite reach her face, then motioned toward an empty booth near the back. "Could we talk for a minute?" The 4 bodyguards fanned out automatically, 2 by the door, 2 near the windows. Someone at the counter muttered, "What is this, a movie?" And a nervous chuckle rippled through the room before dying away. Every survival instinct in Maya screamed that this was bad. People like her didn't get legal visits from movie stars. People like her got bills, eviction notices, and police officers asking if she knew where her brother had been last night. Her mind raced through every small kindness, every conversation with the man at table 7. Had she slipped up, talked too loud one day, given away his hiding spot without realizing? Her cheeks burned with the terrifying thought that she might have ruined his privacy, that she might have been the reason he stopped coming. "I'm working," she said automatically, clinging to the tray in her hand like a shield. Phil wiped his hands and hurried out from the kitchen, apron stained with grease, face pale. "I can spare her," he blurted, then glanced at Maya, eyes wide with the same unspoken question. "What did you do? We're not in any kind of trouble, are we?" he added, voice cracking on the last word. One of the bodyguards looked like he wanted to laugh, but didn't. The woman in the blazer shook her head. "No one is in trouble," she said, her tone steady, rehearsed but gentle. "Mr. Reeves asked us to come personally. He wanted to respect your privacy, so he didn't approach you directly while he was here." Her gaze softened when she saw the panic in Maya's eyes. "He told us you treated him like a regular person. That mattered to him more than you know." Maya's knees felt weak. Mr. Reeves. Hearing the name said like that, in that formal tone, made the two versions of him collide in her head, the quiet guy at table 7 and the global movie star whose face was on billboards halfway across the world. "If he wanted to thank me," she said slowly, carefully, "he could have just come by, like he always did." The woman exchanged a brief glance with the man beside her, then lowered her voice. "He had to leave town abruptly for work," she said. "He's back now, but he's under a lot of pressure. Security, scheduled press. You of all people understand how badly he wanted a place where he was just a man with a cup of coffee. That's why we're here instead." She slid a simple white business card across the table toward Maya. "He asked us to bring you to him if you're willing. He said it was important." Important? The word pressed down on her. Nothing in her life that involved lawyers and men in suits had ever been good. Maya stared at the card. No company logo, just a name, a number, an address in an industrial part of the city she'd never been to. Every instinct sharpened by years of scraping by whispered the same thing. Nothing is free. People didn't just send lawyers and bodyguards to thank a waitress for topping off their coffee. "What if I say no?" she asked, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. The woman's expression didn't change. "Then we thank you for your time, order breakfast, and leave," she said simply. "Mr. Reeves will be disappointed, but he'll understand. He was very clear that this has to be your choice." One of the big men near the window nodded as if to confirm that no one here was going to drag her anywhere. Their restraint almost unnerved her more than if they'd been pushy. Phil shifted beside her, eyes darting between the suits and his waitress whose life suddenly seemed bigger than the diner. "Maya," he murmured, leaning in, "I can cover your tables for an hour, or a day, or whatever this is." He swallowed, then added with a shaky grin, "If John Wick wants to talk to you, kid, you don't make him wait over hash browns." A laugh escaped her before she could stop it, brittle but real. Underneath the fear, something else flickered, a faint, dangerous spark of curiosity. For months, she'd listened to strangers talk about chasing dreams they never pursued. She nodded, smiled, kept pouring coffee, telling herself that stability for her brother mattered more than any risk. And now, out of nowhere, Risk was knocking on the diner door wearing tailored suits and politely asking for a minute of her time. "I can't just leave my brother," she said quietly. "He depends on me." The woman's eyes softened again, as if she'd expected this. "We're not asking you to disappear," she replied. "Just to come hear what he wants to say. If you don't like it, you walk away. No contracts, no pressure." She slid a folded paper across the table. "He wrote this for you in case you were too scared to come. He told me not to open it." Maya stared at the note. His handwriting, she recognized it from the way he scrawled in his notebook at table 7, angled slightly to the right, a little rushed. Her pulse quickened. There was a door in front of her now, one she had never expected to see, much less be invited through. All she had to do was say yes and step through it. But behind that door was a world that could easily crush her if she wasn't careful. She thought of her brother asleep on the couch, school books scattered around him. She thought of her mother's old easel folded in the closet, the art school brochure yellowing under a stack of unpaid bills. She thought of the way he had stood up for her to that angry customer, without cameras, without witnesses, without needing to. No one had asked him to do that. He'd done it because it was right. "Okay," she whispered, more to herself than to them. Then louder, "Okay, I'll go, but if this is some kind OFPR stunt or pity project, I'm walking." The woman actually smiled, for real this time. "Trust me," she said, standing. "If anyone hates pity stories about himself, it's Keanu." She gestured toward the door. "We have a car outside, take what you need." Phil squeezed Maya's shoulder, his voice rough. Go, kid. If it gets weird, call me. I'll come swinging with a frying pan. The bell above the door jingled as Maya stepped out into the gray morning with 4 silent bodyguards and 2 lawyers at her back. Parked at the curb was a black SUV with tinted windows, engine humming softly. As one of the men opened the door for her, she caught a glimpse of herself mirrored in the glass, tired eyes, messy ponytail, cheap apron, and that folded note from a movie star clutched in her hand. Her old life stood behind her, the unknown in front. She took a breath that felt too big for her lungs, ducked her head, and slid into the SUV, the door thudding shut behind her like a chapter closing on a book she hadn't realized she'd been writing all along. He manned behind the screen. The city blurred past in streaks of gray and muted neon as the SUV wove through early morning traffic. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and something expensive and clean. Maya sat ramrod straight, hands twisted together in her lap, the folded note burning against her palm like it might explode if she opened it too soon. One of the bodyguards in the front seat glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his hard features softening. You look like you're on your way to a firing squad, he said dryly. It's just a studio. His voice had a warmth she hadn't expected. He's not as scary as the movies. Maya snorted under her breath. Depends which movies, she muttered, and the man actually chuckled. The tension in her shoulders loosened a fraction. They left the downtown streets and turned into an industrial area she'd only ever passed on late bus rides. Wide warehouses, chain-link fences, security checkpoints. At a guarded gate, the SUV rolled to a stop. A security guard looked in, then did a double take when he spotted the lawyers' badges. The gate lifted immediately, and they drove into a world that felt like a parallel universe. It was chaos in motion. Trucks backed up to loading bays. People in headsets jogged across the lot carrying coils of cables, prop weapons, coffee trays. Huge doors to soundstages yawned open, revealing glimpses of entire worlds built inside, an alleyway under artificial rain, a luxury apartment half-constructed, a stretch of fake subway platform bathed in harsh fluorescent light. Somewhere a director shouted cut, and a roomful of people exhaled at the same time. The SUV stopped near a side entrance. As the door opened, a burst of wind carried in the smell of sawdust, paint, and hot metal. Maya stepped out and just stared. This wasn't the polished glamour of red carpets and interviews. This was work, loud, messy, intricate, alive. A piece of plywood painted to look like marble leaned against a wall. A stunt performer with padded gear taped to his ribs stretched his neck, rolling his shoulders. A makeup artist brushed fake blood onto someone's forehead, chatting casually about their weekend. Stay close, the woman in the blazer said, but her tone was more protective than commanding. They led Maya past a group of extras in business attire waiting in line, past a rack of costumes that smelled faintly of sweat and dry-cleaning fluid, into a quieter hallway that seemed to muffle the world outside. The noise faded behind heavy doors. Her heart did not. They stopped outside a door marked with a simple star and a piece of tape that just said, K, no full name, no ego. The woman turned to Maya. This is him, she said softly. He asked that we bring you straight here. You can go in alone if you're comfortable. Alone. The word sank into her bones. No buffer, no distraction. Just her and the man whose face she'd seen 10,000 times on screens and whose hands she'd sketched while he drank cold coffee in her section. Her fingers shook as she unfolded the note at last. Thank you for the coffee and the quiet. If you're reading this, I probably got too shy to walk back into the diner myself. I'd like to talk, but only if you want to. Okay. There was something almost boyish about the honesty in those lines. No pretense, no flattery, just a simple truth. He was shy too. Somehow that steadied her. She took a breath, reached for the door handle, and pushed. The room inside wasn't the cavernous, luxurious trailer she'd imagined. It was a modest dressing room with a couch, a mirror framed by bulbs, a small table with scripts and a half-eaten banana on it. One wall was covered in pinned-up photographs and sketches, reference images from the film, drawings of cityscapes at night, rough storyboard frames. Sitting on the edge of the couch, hunched over a dog-eared script, was the man from table 7. He looked up when she entered, and for a heartbeat it was just them again, the tired waitress and the quiet stranger. No cameras, no customers, no billboards, just two people who had shared early mornings and refills and pieces of themselves in between orders. Maya, he said, her name sounding almost careful in his mouth, like he was afraid of breaking it. He stood quickly, shoving the script aside, smoothing his t-shirt like a nervous teenager instead of a world-famous actor. I'm really glad you came. Seeing him here in his world was jarring and oddly comforting at the same time. He wore simple clothes, his hair pulled back loosely, lines of exhaustion and something older etched around his eyes. He looked exactly like the man at table 7 and nothing like the invincible hero from the posters. He looked human, fragile even. "You sent lawyers and bodyguards to my job," she said, the words tumbling out before she could soften them. "You kind of didn't give me much space to say no." His face twisted into a wince of guilt. "Yeah, that was dramatic," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "They, default to overkill." Then his gaze met hers again, steady, earnest. "But I meant it. You didn't have to come. I would have understood." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I just really hoped you would." Silence stretched between them, thick with things unspoken. Maya took a step farther into the room, her eyes tracing the sketches on the wall, the organized chaos of his notes. She recognized the same restless lines she saw in her own drawings, the search for something true underneath the surface. "Why," she asked finally, "why was it so important to talk to me? I poured you coffee, I listened, that's my job." Her voice almost broke on the last word, because that was the truth, wasn't it? Her job was to serve, to disappear into the background, to keep other people's lives running while hers stood still. He sank back onto the edge of the couch, motioning for her to sit too. When she stayed standing, he didn't push. His eyes were thoughtful, heavy with some private weight. "You did more than that," he said slowly. "You have no idea how rare it is to walk into a place and have people not perform around you, not turn you into whatever they think you are. You saw me, not the movies, not the headlines, just a guy who likes burnt toast and bad coffee." Her throat tightened. She remembered the way he would exhale when he sat down at table 7, like the world outside dropped off his shoulders for a few minutes. "Everyone sees you," she said softly. "You're everywhere." A sad smile tugged at his mouth. "Being seen isn't the same as being known," he replied. "Most of the time, it's the opposite." He looked down at his hands, turning them palm up like he was reading a script only he could see. "Those mornings in the diner, you let me disappear, you let me be quiet, you never asked for selfies, you never posted my location online, you protected me without even knowing it." He looked up again, eyes bright. "And you were kind, even when you were exhausted. Even when people treated you like you were invisible." Something in her chest cracked open. All the nights she'd cried in the walk-in freezer so no one would see, all the mornings she'd forced a smile when customers snapped their fingers at her, all the times she'd thought kindness was a luxury she couldn't afford, they rushed back with brutal clarity. "I didn't do it for you," she said, her voice rough. "I did it because that's the only way I know how to be." She swallowed hard. "Because if I stop being kind, then the people who hurt me win." He nodded like that sentence hit some place he knew too well. "Exactly," he murmured. "That's resilience, that's courage." He stood again, walked over to the wall of sketches and plucked one off gently. "You're an artist," he said, turning the paper toward her. It was one of her own order slip drawings. She recognized the style instantly, the loose lines capturing motion and light. Her stomach flipped. "How did you?" she started, then stopped when she realized. He'd taken some of the slips she'd thought she'd thrown away, saved them. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to take them without asking. They were beautiful. You have a way of making ordinary things feel sacred." He handed the drawing back to her like it was something precious. "Why aren't you in school or working in an art department? Or something that isn't killing your back for minimum wage?" Question felt like a punch and a gift at the same time. "Because life doesn't care about my sketchbook," she snapped, more harshly than she intended. Then the words tumbled out in a rush, years of swallowed frustration spilling over. "Because my parents died and my brother was 16 and somebody had to keep the lights on. Because art school doesn't accept grief as a scholarship. Because I can't afford to dream." Her eyes burned, but she refused to look away from him. "You don't get it. You have money. Options, safety nets." "I have loss," he said quietly, and the way he said it made her flinch. It wasn't defensive. It was just honest. "Different shapes, different stories, but I know what it is to feel like the universe ripped pages out of your life at random." His gaze softened. I know what it is to feel guilty for surviving, to think you don't deserve happiness unless you've paid for it with pain. The room seemed to shrink around them, the sounds of the set fading into a dull hum beyond the walls. He took a breath, then reached for a plain folder on the table, sliding it toward her like he was afraid she'd push it back. "I'm not here to fix your life," he said. "You're not broken, you're strong, stronger than you should have had to be." His jaw tightened, his voice roughening. "I'm here because your kindness kept me going on mornings when I honestly didn't want to get out of bed, because you reminded me that people can still be good without wanting something, and I can't just walk away from that and pretend it didn't change me." Her fingers hovered over the folder but didn't touch it. "What is this?" she whispered. He exhaled slowly. "Options," he said. "A portfolio review set up with an art director I trust. Tuition covered if you decide to go back to school. A part-time position in the art department on this film if you want to learn on the job. No strings, no press, no headlines." He shook his head, almost pleading. "I don't want a story out of this. I don't want to be your hero. I just want to open a door and step back. You decide whether to walk through." The folder blurred through her tears. For a long moment she couldn't move. Everything she'd buried, the dream of painting, the guilt of wanting more than survival, the fear of stepping outside the narrow road she'd carved for her brother and herself, surged up like a wave threatening to pull her under. "I can't just leave," she said weakly. "My brother, the rent, the diner, they need me." He nodded as if he'd already argued with himself about every one of those points. "There's a stipend for living expenses built in," he said gently. "Phil already has someone who can take extra shifts. Your brother can come visit the set if he wants, and I have a tutor on staff who can help him with his studies if you're worried about that." His eyes searched hers. "This isn't a rescue, Maya. It's a hand extended. You're allowed to take it." The simplicity of his offer made it both more terrifying and more real. No promises that everything would magically become easy. No guarantees she wouldn't fail. Just a chance. One she'd never thought she'd get. Her hand finally landed on the folder, feeling the weight of the paper, the weight of what it meant. Her voice shook as she asked the question lodged deepest in her chest. "Why me?" she whispered. "Out of all the people you meet, all the fans, all the everyone, why pick me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because you didn't pick me," he said. "You didn't want anything from me. You were kind when there was nothing in it for you. You saw a tired man and brought him coffee. The world needs more people like that making art, telling stories, shaping what we see. If I can help that happen, then what's the point of anything I've been given?" Her vision swam. For so long, she'd believed kindness made her easier to exploit, easier to ignore. Hearing him say it was strength, fuel for something larger than both of them, it rattled the foundations of every bitter belief she'd built just to keep going. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed violently in her apron pocket, the harsh vibration slicing through the fragile moment. She fumbled for it, glancing at the screen. Her brother's name flashed in big letters, along with 3 missed calls she hadn't noticed on the drive over. Her stomach dropped. "I'm sorry," she gasped, already answering. "Liam." His voice came through ragged and too loud, panic bleeding through every word. "Maya, are you at work? They just came by. There's a notice on the door. Something's wrong with the apartment." Her gaze snapped up to Keanu, the folder heavy in her hand, her brother's fear pounding in her ear, and for the first time since this morning began, she understood exactly what was at stake. Not just her dream, but their entire fragile life, suddenly tilting on a knife's edge between collapse and possibility.